Welcome to another edition of the Two World Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jacob, and I have with me today my other co-host, who is...
I am Barney.
And you may be noticing, if you're watching today on YouTube, that our backgrounds are different. I'm podcasting from Findlay, Ohio, and Barney's podcasting from...
Kitchen.
So
The dining
you
room
get...
table, yeah.
So for those following us on visually, that's what's going on there. But today we're really excited to talk about driving. And this has been on our list for a few weeks now. And driving is an interesting topic that many of us experience every day. We can have lots of funny memories associated with it, sometimes scary memories, sometimes maybe adventurous memories associated with it. And I really wanted to just get started today by asking Barney, what drew you to choose driving as a podcasting topic?
Yeah, when I was thinking about kind of the scope of our show, then it occurred to me that driving really encompasses, in a way, it touches on all of our themes: travel, international experiences, and the more I thought about it, I realized, oh yeah, it really encompasses hospitality in a number of ways too. And then as I thought about it more and more, I realized, this is such a enormous topic. It's a really rich topic that we could look at from a number of different viewpoints, and probably uncover a lot of things in our conversation today. And we might even want to revisit the topic. And but I think one of the things that really made me want to talk about it was a small little story. This is not necessarily a memorable story, but it was impactful for me. And I wasn't exactly driving a car as much as I was riding on a scooter. But it was just a few months ago when I was incredibly late leaving the house. And I was very worried about whether or not I would make it onto the train. And I was going at a pretty good clip and taking as many shortcuts as I knew. And then I even remembered the kind of concept that you introduced to me, that is something here in Japan called the convenience. It translates into convenience store warp, or like warp zone, where often convenience stores are on a corner at an intersection. So if you want to skip the stoplight, just drive through the parking lot and exit out on the other side. And I really needed to do that. And I made it to the parking area where I was just outside the station. And I still had, thankfully, about 3 or 4 minutes to go before I had to get on my train, which is about the time that I usually end up there anyway. And then I just had the notion, I just had the memory again from Jacob, thanks to Jacob, of the little kind of wooden display, or wooden kind of decoration that he gave me, that on it says "Be still and know." And I thought, this is the time that I need to just take a break and catch my breath, and let all of the rush of hurrying and panic and worrying about getting to the train station on time, to just be still and know that God is God, and to let it all out and leave it behind. And I thought, of all the times that we drive, the many ways that we use driving in our everyday lives, and then special occasions of driving, it's worth it to take a moment and think about it, because sometimes we do need to kind of leave a little bit of ourselves behind after we're done with the driving part too. And so I thought, we must have many stories to share, and it must be a really rich topic. So I thought it would be really fun to chat a little bit about it today, even more.
Wow, Barney, thanks for sharing that. I feel like there's a humorous element, but then also a very deep element there too, because I remember reading an article about the convenience store warping and mentioning it to you because this is kind of a funny term from video games, going
Right. Yeah, right.
warping, going in a pipe and ending up somewhere else, like quickly circumventing some
Yeah.
space. But then like how you remembered in the midst of the rush
Hmm.
to slow down and not um, go at a pace that would be, causing you stress and um, that's great. Well,
Hmm.
as you're sharing that, it made me think of a time where I've wanted to be still while I was driving
Yeah.
and slow down. And I actually have a picture of it. And I believe this is maybe from 2005. Um, I had
Mm.
started the PhD program at Regent University, and um, my uncle and his family they owned a home in Chincoteague, Virginia, and it was not where they lived usually. They normally lived in Kent, Maryland, but they would go to this other home from time to time throughout the year, and it was drivable from Regent. And so
Mm.
I had these residencies where I would um, be there essentially for 2 weeks in a row and studying and going to class. And they were part of the program where you got your in-person coursework and then you'd go home and you do assignments afterwards and you would do assignments before getting there. But anyway, during one of these residencies, I knew that they were going to Chincoteague. So I went up to visit them. And on the drive from Virginia to Chincoteague, you go across this long Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And I just remember being so struck by the sunset as I was driving along to visit them. And I took a picture of it. And this is the picture I took. And I had been working so hard that week and I was excited to see them. And I was really missing my family back home. And it was almost as if, like you said, that plaque says, be still and know. It's like almost in this moment, I saw the beauty of that sunset and helped me slow down and appreciate the moment I was in. And amidst the busyness of that season of trying to get through that doctoral program and to just appreciate um, life and the gifts of the people who were around me, those who I was about to visit and those that I would go back to after the residency was over. And so and I think driving sometimes helps you get to that place because you're kind of in a little bit of uh, a passive state. I mean, you're focused on being safe and keeping the vehicle going, but part of your brain is also able, since you can't be doing something else, to take in the environment in a way you wouldn't normally just sit and look out and take in the environment necessarily. And so, because I was driving, it helped me get almost in that state where I could be more reflective and pensive, and because I had the time, as I drove along there. And so, anyway, that was a very special memory for me. And I always will appreciate the hospitality my uncle and his family showed me when I visit them. And I also cherish the memories of taking that drive up to see them. And interestingly enough, I was able to go with my family years later, and they got to go over
Mm.
that bridge too. And
Oh.
yeah, it's just a really neat drive in general. But then you
Hmm.
add the sunset, and it becomes extra special. So
Oh, really? Yeah.
yeah, so I was going to ask you, thinking back, going real far, what was your first driving experience that you can remember? And how did it feel to be behind the wheel for the first time?
Yeah, I remember being surprised when one day, I guess I was 15, and my dad just came in and he said, it's time to try and drive. And I was like, whoa, really? Are you sure I'm ready? This is amazing. And I guess I kind of learned later on that yes, he was putting on a kind of brave front, and that he he didn't have as much fun maybe as I did on my first time. But I thought, oh yeah, driving is a piece of cake. I can drive, anybody can drive. All you do is sit there and push the accelerator and then push the brake and um and then to compound it in this case, um we were driving a 5 speed, so a manual transmission car.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, that was the one part that I had to learn the nuances of. And yeah, I'm sure that there was a lot of bucking involved and a lot of stalling, I'm sure, along the way. But yeah, thankfully my house is in the countryside, and so I was careful. My dad, he left it up to me. He didn't tell me which way to go or anything like that. And um but I was careful to kind of take country roads and um just drive around kind of the area around our home. But I remember that I ended up, I don't know why, just randomly taking turns coming up Silver Road, um, which leads into Mechanicsburg. And what I didn't know is that the stop sign at the end of Silver Road, where it connects to Mechanicsburg, is very steep.
Oh,
so,
that's hard
so
in
I
a
know,
manual transmission.
I know,
Wow.
and my very first time. I know. So thankfully I didn't choose like, what, like Wayne Avenue where it goes up to where it, goes up that really big hill that connects with Quimby, I think, whatever it is. But Silver Road was equally bad. And also thankfully there was no one behind me. But yeah, my dad was calm and just gave me advice on what to do, and we made the turn and then got ourselves back home and all in one piece. And and then I went in the door and my mom said, "How was it?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it was really fun. We had a great time." My dad didn't say much of anything. I think he sat down for a while just to compose himself afterwards. But yeah, I'm really glad
Mm.
that I was able to learn that skill of being able to drive a manual transmission, and I really got a lot better at it. Where I could, even just pull out of first gear without even using the gas. Just by kind of understanding where the point is, where the clutch releases and engages the gear, in such a way that you don't have to if you're gentle enough, you don't have to give any gas to make the car start to go. And I felt like that's kind of like um, that's like kind of the sign where you really kind of understand the nuances of your car and how it works. And um, yeah, from that very first moment till a bit later, then I could use driving to gain a lot of experience and share that moment, that memory that really has stuck with me all of these years now, with my dad. And hopefully, I'm sure it stuck with him too.
Oh
Hopefully,
yeah.
he can look back on it and laugh as well. But
Oh
yeah,
man, I love that.
mhm,
That's a great memory. Oh, fantastic.
yeah. Mm,
Well, I would like to share a little bit about my first experience, and um, I'm going to share a photo here. And do you remember a while back we talked about this canoe trip that I went on with my dad that was an absolute disaster?
mm,
This I found this
mhm.
photo uh, from that trip. So
Oh boy.
this is that day, and that's us before we left. That I took the picture, and there's my dad and mom sitting there with my aunt Gladys, and we're all smiles because we don't know what we're about to
No,
endure.
no,
But
no, not at all.
but anyway, behind my parents and my aunt Gladys is the first car that I ever experienced driving, a Dodge Dynasty.
Oh wow.
Yes, and 1991 Dodge Dynasty, and I was really fortunate to uh, start driving as soon as I was eligible. My
Mhm.
parents were real supportive of right when I turned 16, getting my permit, and um, my mom and dad took turns taking me out. And I just remember the first time I tried driving, it was on the old National Pike, just off of
Oh.
that because we lived off of that road. I mean,
Mhm.
we both my parents' house and my grandma's house were right there, and so I could just drive small little stretches, and I could go from one driveway
Mm.
because the houses were beside each other, and turn onto the road, and then go over to the other driveway and pull in,
Mhm.
and real little baby steps, But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, we had tractors throughout my grown up years, and I had mowed the lawn so much that I felt a general comfortable feeling just being behind a wheel.
Right.
And so
Mhm.
we didn't have the the standard. We had an automatic transmission, so that made it even easier. I just had to put it in gear and go. So
Right.
they did some, um, initial tests with me, and then took me driving on Route 40 towards Oglebay Park. And some of those back roads are not really heavily traveled and
Mm.
or interesting scenery. And I remember driving those routes with them too in that Dodge Dynasty. And so I didn't have any um, stop sign on an angle that I had to worry about, like on an incline, like you did. But I think for me, the first kind of scary moment that would
Mhm.
be approximate to that feeling would be trying to merge for the first time onto Route
Oh,
70 or
yeah. Oh,
Interstate 70,
gee.
excuse me, because
Mm-hmm.
we would take 70 virtually every day. What because I would go to school in Wheeling, West
Mm-hmm.
Virginia, and then some. We did also quite a bit of shopping in Washington, Pennsylvania, and both of those required pretty much going on 70. You could go 40, but it was much more efficient to go 70.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, that those would be some early experiences. Um, so I wanted to ask, do you have any favorite road trip memories or
Oh, yeah.
destinations? Yeah, would you be willing to share a little bit about
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah, I know, I don't know. This story I'm going to say is it's such a gift in so many ways, and I just hope that one day I can do something like this with my kids. It was back, and I have pictures to go with it. Um, it was back in 2012, and I was home in summer, and I said to my parents, I said, you know what? Let's just take a road trip. I always have trouble with jet lag, the first few days anyway. So I'm going to be up. Why don't we just, leave at 6 a.m. someday? And they're, just go. Let's just go out west. And they're like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. And I think like that day, then my dad went to AAA and got some maps, and then we rented. We knew we'd be camping, so we at that time they had just a small VW, and then they rented a bigger car, and then I think the next day, then we just went, and we just decided we didn't have a goal in mind. We just decided let's head west and get somewhere, and the first we made it to like uh, maybe the middle bit of Wisconsin after getting through Chicago, and then we stayed. And then my mom said, "Oh, there are some areas around here, not too far from here, from the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, like in the earlier books when they were still." Kind of before they went to Kansas. And so, yeah, we visited those places. I think we saw Plum Creek, and then we thought, well, let's go to where they were in South Dakota. And then we headed there after camping, and we realized, what are we doing on the interstate? Because, there's not much traffic at all. So we thought, we just said to ourselves, shall we try it? And we did. And we went on a country road, and it's as straight as can be and much less traffic and probably the same speed limit. And it was just so great to do that, to have no plan. And I remember that I actually shared at at church about this trip after the fact, and mentioned how our trip coincided with the a few days before the Sturgis motorcycle gathering took place in South
Oh,
Dakota. So
wow.
so we saw well, especially when we were on the highway, we saw a number of motorcycles, and it was really fun to see all of the different types of motorcycles that we could see. And yeah, I mean, we had um, you know um, good South Dakota beef, at a place, and we went to Mount Rushmore, of course, and stayed at Custer National Park, and we had a nice mix of camping and one or two hotels, because especially on the way home, because we had to wash our clothes.
Oh, of course, of
Because yeah,
course.
right. So
You got to make
it's
space for that. Yeah.
yes, right, yeah, right, yeah, those things. And I still remember my mom, where was it, somewhere um in that area, one of the cities, where we just happened to, we would check like the little guidebook, AAA guidebook, and we found some Mexican restaurant. And for every year after that, my mom just raved and raved, and they were very delicious about the refried beans that they had. And we, there weren't many people there, and we chatted with them, and they said, "Oh yes, we make them fresh every day. We start and really slowly cook them." And it was very clear that that was true. And we had just just untold memories
Mm,
from that trip that was just so great in every way. And I'll try to share a few photos from the trip that relate to driving.
perfect.
So let's see. I got to get my browser set up here before I share a photo here because it's right now it's set to the wrong
Oh yeah. And while you're doing
photo.
that, I just
Hmm.
would like to mention that what I like about that story is the spontaneity of the trip. And so sometimes the charm in driving is discovery and not
Hmm.
knowing what good things you will come across and or how you will navigate certain challenges and then find a solution. And um, part of that really interesting part aspect of that trip is how you discovered these restaurants and these roads and you didn't know
Hmm.
ahead of time. And so I think that's one interesting thing about driving, that sense of adventure and journey.
Yeah. It makes me think of another fun thing that we did. My mom had a book from the library that she had just been reading to herself when she wasn't driving, and she kept chuckling about this book, and we kept wondering what's so funny. And then we just naturally transitioned to taking turns reading the book out loud, and it was like the unexpected or unexpected disciple, something like that. It's a very interesting book about a person who was a student at Brown University, and for his intercultural experience, instead of going abroad, he went to Liberty University. And yeah, and he wrote all he got everyone's permission later and turned it into a book of all of these interesting experiences. And it was quite enjoyable. It was nonfiction, so very, very fun to read in that way,
What's it
knowing
called
that it was
again?
a unexpected disciple, maybe
Okay.
something like
Oh,
that.
oh,
Yeah.
I have to get that. Thanks,
Yeah.
Barney. I should check it out.
If you search that plot, then it'll
Okay.
pop up for sure. And from there, then we also spontaneously started each trip with me reading from Oswald Chambers' My Utmost for His Highest each morning. Then when we
Oh,
got in the car, and then we just spent a little time with devotion that way.
wow.
And yeah, I just can't imagine a better time, and so thankful for it. And then um, I'll talk a little bit about the end here, but let's just take a look at some photos here.
Yes.
Um, so this is in South Dakota, zipping down the road,
Ah,
and what we're having here, I've got to minimize a few things here, is sunflowers.
oh, wow.
So yeah, so we were right in the time where the sunflowers were blooming. It was just miles after miles of sunflowers. And it was so the other neat thing was, we would see on the map, we weren't using GPS, we were using the old, paperback, like this area. Now you're entering like a reservation, like from a Native American tribe. And we would notice things like there's no fences, like little small subtle things that maybe are unique to that community's culture,
Yes.
like no dividing between property lines and things like that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And so we saw the sunflowers, and then this was on the nice straight road. I thought this is so interesting to see. Um, there's a little bit of a canal, and then a train track that was built
Oh, wow.
um, along that, and then just more stretches of water as we see. And then on the road, we pulled off, as you can see, to take this picture, and then the road is going off in the distance. And yeah, and then we um this is as far as we decided to go. We went to I guess it's called Devil's Spire or Devil's Tower
Mm, mm.
in Wyoming. And it was interesting to see there's a lot of other Native American names for it. Like one of them is it deals with like a bear's house maybe or something like that. So we
Oh,
preferred calling it that instead. But
yeah.
yeah, of course, this is from the Steven Spielberg movie. It was featured there in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
yeah, and I took a number of photos of that. I liked how the sun was, and we actually camped right in that area
Wow.
too. Yeah, and we went to this tiny little diner in the town there, and it was the delicious food that they had for us, and then we even got a mug to go with it.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
so cool.
and this is I guess on the way. So there's two ways that you can go to Mount Rushmore from Custer National Forest or State Park, I guess. Um, one is kind of the main way, like everyone takes like on like a big like you know 6 lane highway, 3 lanes on each side. And the other way they recommended, why don't you take Needles Highway? And as you can see in this picture, it's an old road that was built through rock at a number of ways
Wow.
in very narrow areas at some point, and curves and twists and turns. And one of the neat things, I'm not sure if I have a photo of it, but one of the neat things is you see Mount Rushmore in the distance, and you see it kind of getting closer and closer, and it seems like it's in the forest from the point of view that you
Oh,
get coming at this way. And it's very neat to see that,
oh
that point
yeah.
of view. And then um, as we were driving in um, Custer National or State Park, I guess, there were bison, there were buffalo around, and people just, did their best not to avoid them as they could. And I'm sure a lot of people took photos, and as we did. And here's another
Wow.
another bit of perspective for how narrow, the car in front of us is just barely getting through.
Wow.
And it's so interesting that they made this road, and they made it in this way. And it seems the walls are so textured that you have to think, um, what was the equipment that they were using to make these roads? And also so grateful that they kept them, that they didn't like close the roads, or they didn't say, it's
Yes.
only usable at certain times. But well, maybe that's so, but they left it as an option for people, kind of as a storytelling way, means of telling stories, in a way of imagining taking yourself back on this road, and how was it all those many years ago when this was the road to get to that area.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah. Mm.
Yes, and yeah, for those who are just listening, um, the there is essentially what looks like a just stone rock mountain, and there's just the most narrow of tunnels, carved right out in the middle, and a vehicle can just barely fit through. It extends above the vehicle. What is that about? Would you say like 12 feet tall or
Yeah, I was
something
gonna
like that?
maybe twice the size height,
Yeah,
maybe, but yeah,
but the
but
narrowness, like I don't
yeah.
know, that's fascinating. Well, thank
Hmm.
you for sharing that, Barney.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as you have shared there about um, the unexpected aspects of a spontaneous trip. I was hoping to follow up with, for our family, a familiar planned stop at
Ah.
a location that we always look forward to going.
Hmm.
And as part of our trips when we go to Virginia or to DC, we always like to go to this one rest area, and it's in Maryland. After you pass um, through
Oh,
Cumberland, Maryland,
yeah.
as you're on Interstate, like Route 68, and you're heading towards Hagerstown,
Mm.
right before 68 intersects with 70, it comes up this hill, and then it goes through this cut and this mountain. When I was a little kid, I used to call it the cut in the rock. And my parents, every time we go to see my grandparents, would make a big deal. We would drive through it, and if I were sleeping, they'd say, "Jacob, wake up! We're getting close to the cut in the rock." And I
Mm.
would say, "Ooh, look at that!" And if my dad's camera was out, I tried to take a picture. And
Oh, yeah.
now as an adult, I was so happy that they eventually built a rest area where you could pull off and walk
Yeah.
there. There is a place where you can actually go over top of the interstate, like a walkway.
Whoa.
And there's a picture of it here.
Wow.
And but it has the most incredible view. And my kids and Katie and I will get out and walk around and look and take in the view. And every time we make this trip, we look forward to going here. And so, and ever since I was little, I just marveled at the different layers of the rock,
Mm.
and you see the
Oh,
different
yeah.
colors and the different
Mm.
strata, and um, and just how the road curves around, and now that you can um, walk over it, it just feels with that walkway like it's a extra treat, particularly for Hannah. I remember walking over it this most recent time this past summer, and
Hmm.
wait, she would wave at vehicles, and people would wave to her, as they drove under the bridge and under the
Oh
walkway,
wow.
and
Oh wow.
so sometimes it's the unexpected things, and sometimes it's the planned when you're driving, and in both
Mm.
cases they have their strengths, for sure. So, uh, I was going to ask a little bit to shift gears here, no pun
Mhm.
intended.
No, but yeah, right, yeah.
um, what are some of your personal driving habits, both good and bad?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a great question because I think that I guess I can start off with a funny story. It made me think that I probably drive differently um, in Japan than I do in America. I was before I made that statement, I realized that I actually literally do drive differently. Um, I mean, not only is it a different side of the road, but it's it's the I'll admit a number of times I have pulled out of the driveway on the wrong side of the road. I'm sorry, it happens,
It's
but
deeply programmed in there.
it
It's hard to
really
get
is. It really
that
is.
fundamental orientation to change for driving.
And the one thing that you never think about, but is the hardest thing to do, is that the turn signal and the windshield wipers are opposite. So so
Oh.
every time when I go back home for the first few days and I want to turn left, the windshield wiper goes on. And when I get back to Japan and I want to change lanes, the windshield wiper goes on. So it's just one of those things that you never think about and just do. And then they're switched on you all of a sudden. But I guess for driving habits, yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily a great driver or um a considerate driver maybe, but um I I think one of my biggest habits, one of the things that I try to do the most is maybe think about anticipate if the light is going to change. So it's very easy to do here in Japan because the crosswalk automatically goes. You don't have to press a button for the signal. So if you see it start to flash, then you know, oh, okay, it's going to be amber, it's going to be yellow soon. So just go ahead and slow down because you won't be able to make it. And so I think I try to do my best to maybe save gas in that way. By just, if it's not going to go, then I'm just gonna coast a bit. I'm just gonna let off on the accelerator and just kind of ease myself into a stop there. Um, but yeah, I think that's otherwise sometimes recently Ayako said that maybe I was driving a little bit too fast um in general through town. So that's one thing I've been working on. Trying to keep it around, she says around 60 kilometers. So it's probably just like 40 miles an hour or so. Maybe even less. It's 60 divided by 1.6. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but yeah, so it the other interesting thing is that everything feels faster here in Japan, even though we're driving slower. Um, the speed limit is only 60 on highways or so, although I guess they've recently upped it a little bit more, but but because of that, then everything feels like it's going a little bit faster, even though just because we're so used to driving a little bit slower in general. And so yeah, so I guess what I want to say is when I go back to the US, everything really feels fast. Like just this summer, I was driving like 30 everywhere we're going. And it's like, I don't know, it just feels so fast otherwise, I was like, I really am sorry for the people behind me, but I just don't feel comfortable going so fast anymore.
That's
And
interesting.
yeah.
Well, as you're talking about that, I was kind of wondering. a little bit about driving in Japan.
Mhm.
And maybe if you could talk a little bit about the driving culture and etiquette there. Are there unique driving customs that are different? Like in the US, one of the things that can drive me nuts is when somebody's riding my bumper. I think that's like
Ah,
poor driving etiquette, but it can
mhm,
be quite common actually,
mhm.
depending on the situation. Because in Wayne County, in a lot of the country roads, there are a lot of Amish buggies, and if you get behind a buggy
Oh
and
yeah.
somebody's impatient behind you, they'll ride your bumper, but you have to be safe, and you don't want to
Mhm.
pass unless there's a clear long stretch of the road where it's safe to do so. But in Japan, is the etiquette different around that? Do you encounter that still there? Or maybe you could just speak to some of those general
Mm.
questions about driving culture.
Yeah, I think it's probably a lot less common. It happens on occasion, but I can't think of so many times. Probably in the US would be much more common. But one thing that somebody pointed out to me when he was visiting me, he said, "Why is it that you back into your parking space all the time?" And I thought, "Oh, isn't this just what we always do?" I couldn't remember the way we did it in America. I was like, "Wait, we don't always just back into parking spots." But yeah, so and that's one thing that we often do. It's really rare to see someone pull into a spot. Um, and I think that Japan does a good thing with using the hazards. So, like, also speaking of parking, so when you see your spot and you're getting ready to park, then you put your hazards on. And it's kind of a way to say, first of all, say, "Hey, everybody, this is my spot," but also to say, "Watch out, everybody, I'm backing up." And then we also use the hazards as a way to say thank you. So, like if someone lets you in, then you get in and then you put your hazards on just a little bit to acknowledge their kindness. Um, and that's really common. And I tried to do that sometime in America, and I was like, oh, maybe they don't know why I have to. Maybe they're a little bit alarmed. They're like, oh no, he's having car trouble. um,
Mm,
yeah,
interesting.
but yeah,
I have noticed, and I don't know if you've seen this too in America, but sometimes like a semi truck will flash the lights to let another semi truck
yes.
out, and then
Mm-hmm.
after they come out and to say thank you, they kind of blink their like, or they do something with their lights to signal to the
Mm,
semi behind them. Thanks so
mm-hmm.
much, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of a
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. And I remember my driver's ed person saying, watch for semis, they can be helpful, like once you're passing them and then you have enough space to merge back into your lane, they'll usually flash their lights to let you know that it's cleared. So yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that's good. But I can't really think of too many too many other things, but I guess that yeah, I think in general people tend to go a little bit more cautiously. Maybe they don't you don't really see people rushing to get lights, but I think that in general, I think it might be a little bit more laid back. I mean, at least in this area. I guess other areas of Japan might be a little bit different. There are some prefectures that are really high in the accident range, that they're always number one in it. It's not Tokyo actually. So the least they're not as populated, but they do have more, and it's probably more accidents based on probably people's temperament and driving
Okay.
habits. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
as you were talking about the hazard lights there and, you know, driving temperament and things, are there some safety tips that every driver should know and follow that you've learned over the years? Maybe responsible or defensive driving practices
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
things that you've noticed that have been helpful to you?
Yeah. Maybe one thing that I noticed that I never really thought about is they really emphasize that you check like if before you're turning so in America it would be before you're turning right.
Mm.
But here in Japan it's before you're turning left. um Look, give extra attention in case there's bicycles coming.
Mm.
So we have lots of people of all ages riding bicycles, and yeah, especially if they're younger kids and they don't have a real sense of what it means to drive, so they don't anticipate what cars are going to do so readily, and they just see that the crosswalk light is green, so that they just go. And so it's our responsibility as a driver to check over our shoulder a few times, make sure that no bicycle is coming. And
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I think that
Okay.
was that was something that was actually something that got me in trouble twice when I was trying to pass the Japanese um, driver's license test, because I never thought about that. And then they emphasize, finally the second time the instructor or the proctor said, always make sure to, before you're turning left, go left a little bit more on the road and make sure that you're looking, a number of times to make
Mm.
sure that no one's coming. So they recommend getting real close to the side of the road that you're turning to kind of block any chance that someone on a scooter or bicycle um, and on the road might try to cut in on you while you're taking off from the stoplight. So like if you're
Oh,
you're
okay.
turning left, they are going straight, to reduce the chance of them going straight right as you're turning left, then you want to make it as
Ah,
narrow as possible so that they can't sneak in there on you, so
I
that
see.
you go first and then they go in. But it's hard to imagine this because it's on a closed course, and so you have to kind of,
Okay.
pretend that there are these things that you have to watch out for.
Wow. Yes. And um, for our listeners, maybe just to mention, Barney and I had a lot of conversations over that period of time when you were going through the process of getting your license, because you were driving on was it an international license for a
Yeah.
while? And
Mm-hmm.
then when you got the local license, just it's a very strict, stringent, very high standards, high expectations tests and process,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you had
Mm-hmm.
to, it was rigorous. I remember
Mm-hmm.
you, and you said a lot of people opt to go through a course that it costs a lot of money, but you're
Oh,
more
it does.
kind
Yeah.
of guaranteed at the end. It's kind of the experience is kind of catered to make it more easy to pass the first time. But if you
Mm-hmm.
go without the course, it's like a slog, right? I mean,
Oh,
that's
it
my
really was.
sense from what you said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so much so that I even put together a web page um that I can share. It was this web page after my experience, and I took all of my
Oh, wow.
um, narrative and my memories and put it all into as much, clear tips as I could,
Wow.
with talking
That's
about the
amazing.
eye exam, because instead of using letters for the eye exam, it is like it's called the Landolt C. So it's just a C that is either where is the empty space? Is it pointed up? Is it pointed down? Is it left? Is it right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then here, if you can see on YouTube, and I don't know that I can describe it for people on the podcast, is an image of a copy that they provide you, photocopy of the driving course. And it starts off with a nice, just, get up to 40 kilometers an hour, go around some real slow curves and curve around again. Then you have to pretend to merge once, and then a bunch of right turns and left turns. And um, that's the time where you have to adjust, compensate for bicycles. And then it involves a series of two or three 90-degree turns, which we never ever encounter on the road, normally. And then it winds around with right turns and all of these little potential spots where you can mess up, or mess up for the third or fourth time to end your test. Because some things are instant fails, and some things, you get points, so if you miss so many times, then you get it. And then it finishes with an S turn, and then um, goes through another intersection, and then there's kind of a pedestrian walk where, of course, there's no pedestrians, and it's unclear in the handbook what you're supposed to do there. And I even asked the proctor before the test, when he's giving us this, kind of the rundown. I said, "What are we supposed to do in this spot? I noticed that's there. And he said, well, you should just decide for yourself. So it being, unhelpful.
Oh.
Yeah. And then if you can get it that far, then you have to park, put on the parking brake, put it into gear, and then turn off. So there's a set procedure for the way you're supposed to do things. And then
Oh,
on the web page, I included a
never
Google,
seen anything like
map.
this.
I
It,
know.
it looks like a maze,
It
you know.
honestly does. And I'm very thankful that whatever this is, this V shape, I'm very thankful that I didn't have to do that. So
Oh,
it could
wow.
be even worse. And there's a mock railroad track, which thankfully I didn't have to do. And
Oh my
and then I
goodness.
went through and I actually walked the course and took photos and linked the photos to the webpage of, what it looks like in person, doing my best that if it's possible to make it so that other people don't have to go through what I had to go through,
Barney,
and hopefully they can pass it in a few more times than I did, and or a few fewer times than what I did.
that's a true labor of love, what
Yeah,
you
right. Oh
are
boy, yeah,
presenting
it
there.
really was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, and hopefully what you put together will help other people as
Hmm.
they're working on
Hmm.
that. Because I remember for you, it was quite stressful. I remember it
Oh
was
yeah.
like
Hmm.
and frustrating, but you persisted and you saved a ton of money by going
Oh,
that
that's the
route.
truth. Oh, that's very true. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
what
That's very
what
true.
what was it? Was it like did you save 1,000 or 2,000 or how much do you think it would?
Yeah, right. So each time I took the test, I paid about like $20 to take the test, and then I I technically I took the test 5 times. The very first time I took it, I had only been in Japan for like less than a year. And I thought, oh, I'm the best driver in the world. I've been driving since I was 16. This is piece of cake, And then suddenly the woman's like, okay, the test is over. It's like, what? What did I do wrong? And I was like, this test is completely bogus. I'm never doing this again. And then because I wasn't driving at that time anyway, then I thought, okay, well, I need to get it now. And then it took me 4 times. So I spent $100 on the test. But if I had gone to the school, the driving school, I would have spent almost $2,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, I did save. Yeah, I
Well,
saved
well
a
done.
big amount, but it was very, very stressful. So much so that
Oh.
I was tempted to take the school route. But
Mm.
what a good story that I have for myself, for the people who see the webpage, and for my kids to
Yes.
be able to share that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and kind of the perseverance too. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
give up. You
Mm-hmm.
kept working at it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
commendable. Um, well, on this topic of driving practices for that help with safety, I would like to share one,
Yeah.
and that is when merging onto a highway. If there's a car that's in front of you that's also on the ramp that's about to merge, don't ever assume that they're just going to go when they get to the end of the ramp onto the highway, even if it looks clear to you, because different drivers have different degrees of caution when it comes to merging. And a number of accidents have happened when the car behind the first car that's merging assumes that they're going to go and they stop at the
Oh.
end of the ramp because they want to be extra cautious, and then the car behind isn't looking at them, they're looking onto
Oh.
the highway to make sure that there's
Of
no other
course.
truck, and then they run into each other. There's two specific locations where I think of this in my driving experience, and one is in Wayne County when you're on Kidron Road and you're getting onto 30 and you're turning left.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember this.
Mm-hmm.
It's right by Kidron
Mm-hmm.
Cars. You go past Kidron
Right.
Cars, and then you have to cross one lane of traffic, and
Yeah.
then you turn left, and there's a little bit of a merging area. And cars sometimes there might be multiple cars that get across the first lane of traffic and are in that merging area ready to pull out.
Oh
And
yeah.
there are some cases where, people assume the car in front of them is going to go and they don't. And that can be really tricky. And the other one that I think of is in Washington, Pennsylvania. Um, Close to where I grew up, when you're coming off of Route 19 onto Interstate 70, it's a similar thing. You get on this ramp, and it's a real long ramp, and you would assume it looks clear that there's a good flow, people are going to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen multiple times where people have stopped, and
Ooh.
so anyway, just throwing that out there as a helpful practice. And a similar version of that is when you're stopped at a stop sign and you see a car approaching, um, they're coming towards you and they have their turn signal on. Sometimes it's
Mm,
helpful, and
oh
maybe even
yeah.
most of the time, just to wait till they commit to the turn,
Hmm.
because in a few cases, sometimes a person will go past the intersection where you are and turn a
Oh yeah.
driveway just
Oh
past
yeah.
it, or something like that, a
Mm,
restaurant just past. So you always have to
mm.
make sure, is that turn signal 100% for the road that I'm at? Or so once they commit to the turn, then it feels
Oh yeah.
safer to go. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember even we had like some um advice for the day calendar, like some once a day calendar thing, and exactly one of those days was, don't start your turn until you see the tires of the car turn.
Yes.
Like you say that they're committing, yeah, because you just never know, their turn signal might be on by accident or going to a different place, and then bam. But what you said reminded me of this great story that I love to tell. My mom, I wasn't there, but she told the story and I still love it so much. She was driving and she thought that the car in front of her was turning right. And so she thought, you know, signal's red, of course in America you can turn right on red, but she thought, nobody's coming. Why aren't you turning right? So she honked the horn and she said, the guy looked right and he looked left and went straight through the red line. I just always think what was going through his mind when this person behind him honks so. And then my mom got to turn
Oh,
right. So it all worked out.
oh. Well, fortunately for him, he made it safely. There
He
wasn't
did,
any
and there were
there
no
wasn't any
cops
problem.
around.
That's good. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and that there was no accident too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but since we've talked a little bit about safety, I
Mhm.
wanted to ask, have you ever been involved with or witnessed or seen a fender bender? And do you have any stories related to that when driving takes that kind of turn for the worse and
Mhm.
there's an accident? Um,
Yeah, of course, as many times as I thought I was the best driver in the world, I have not been the best driver in the world. And when I've had a few scrapes, thankfully, most of them were in parking lots. So, I can just I just got a citation instead of like having to pay, like an actual, um, instead of the cops being able to really charge me with anything, just for the sake of insurance. And one time it was at the Wayne Center shopping center right by the hospital, and
oh,
and
right.
I bumped. This was the case where I thought the car was not turning, and they did turn. And but I was in the wrong. I forget how it was, or maybe something like that. Then it was my fault that I ran into them. And it turned out it was my grandma's neighbor.
Oh
So,
no. Oh.
so of course, yes. I mean, thankfully, she was very, we figured out who we were, who each person was
Oh
in the end,
man.
and then I could say, hey, guess who I ran into,
Ran
today,
into.
and yeah, but
Oh.
thankfully, never anything serious.
Oh, good.
The maybe the worst of it was I was I still think that I should have waited to go home, but I was going home for Christmas break from Goshen, and it was incredibly snowy. And I had a dentist appointment the next day, and I probably should have just stayed and then just driven through the night. But I left when I did, and I took the toll road, and it was just so snowy, and I was behind the semis and just going like 35 or so. And I was getting confident and I thought, maybe I can just gain a little bit more time. That's probably one of my worst habits is trying to make time, trying to make time, trying to make good time. And I did. I was fine for a while. And then I got a drift or something like that. My car went into the median, and it was slow enough that there was no damage, just I was stuck.
Mm.
And and a state patrol came and radioed, and then I had to pay to get towed out, and then I had to pay a fine for not being a safe driver, and then that's what you get for trying to make time on
Oh,
Story
right,
Road. And yeah,
right,
and even my sister and I were just this last summer, we're talking about, when you think about it and you're trying to make time, maybe you save a total of 5 minutes.
right.
You don't really, you think that you're really making time, but you don't really,
It's
you
not
can't
worth it.
shave off. Yeah, you can't shave off 30 minutes. You can't shave off an hour. You can shave off maybe 10 minutes. And that is just such a small amount of time
It
that
is.
it's just so much more important to be safe
Yeah,
and not have to worry about cops.
yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. It
Wow.
seems when you're going fast, oh yeah, make time, but no, you don't. You're not really making time. So that helped put things in perspective for you. But
Yeah, that's really
had
good
how
advice.
is your record pretty good for yourself in terms of driving, or?
I've had some similar experiences to you in fender benders, and um, I have had a few accidents. The one that I uh, really wanted to share about today that was most memorable was on Christmas Eve in
Mm,
2011. Um, our whole family had gone to sleep, and we're resting quietly. And then I was startled, and I woke up. I felt like I heard a loud noise, and I felt like a shake.
oh,
And I was like, "Oh my goodness, what was that?" And then I thought, "Oh, maybe." I was like so tired. I thought, "Oh, maybe
oh
that
yeah.
was like one of our animals like banging something that fell over downstairs, or it's probably fine. I'll get it in the morning." So I went back to sleep. And then just a little bit later, I heard a pounding at the front door. Bang, bang, bang,
Oh
bang,
no.
bang, 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 bang. And so I went down, and there was a policeman standing there.
Whoa.
And he started asking me questions. And I'm going to share my screen right now.
Mm.
This is what the scene was like
Oh
outside of our house.
wow.
Actually, this is your grandparents' house in Orville. At the
Oh.
time, we were renting from your parents. And I had no clue what had happened. I had been asleep, and a driver had lost control of the vehicle, come into the yard, and hit both of our cars, and your parents' house. It was your grandparents'
Oh,
house, and then they backed up and they drove away. And so
oh
when the police arrived on the scene, since they hadn't stayed, there was no way to know how this like
no.
damage occurred, and all they saw were these two vehicles. So this driver had uh, left these tracks, and
Oh,
the way they hit our vehicles, it was the front of our van and it was the
mm,
back of our car,
yeah.
and it hit the van harder than the car, so it pushed the van into the
Mm,
yard,
yeah.
but the car was just pushed a little bit. So the police, for all they knew, the van that was pushed into the yard was the one
Oh,
that hit,
made the
you know,
tracks.
and they show
Mm,
up and they see these vehicles and these like, so it took me, I mean, I had just woken up from, I was like shocked and had no
yeah.
clue what was going on. So it took us all a while to figure out what was going on. And then within probably, I want to say 10 to 15 minutes, they found the other vehicle down the street. Um, and so, you know, it ended up being, they were able to get to the bottom of it. And we were,
Wow. Yes.
through our insurance companies, we weren't at fault, and they were able to
Hmm.
repair these vehicles. But that was a very memorable Christmas
Wow.
Eve there
Oh,
in
yeah. Oh,
2011. So,
so unexpected. Oh, you
yeah,
would never think in so
yeah.
many years that that would ever happen.
Yes.
Oh,
Um,
dear.
but I have had my own experiences, and like you said, learned lessons from them.
Hmm.
Um, one of my accidents happened in high school, and I was looking, waving to friends, and not looking ahead, and I ran
Oh,
into another student who's driving the other.
mm.
Pardon me, I ran
Oh,
into another car
car. Yeah.
that another student was driving,
Right.
and I
That's
don't
right.
think
Yeah.
they were looking either, but both of
Oh,
us,
no.
could have.
Hmm.
They were like, but could have done better with that. But anyway, I learned from that. I need to pay more attention, um,
Yeah.
one time I was backing out of a driveway and didn't see oncoming, um,
Hmm.
you know, vehicle. So there are some definite lessons learned about checking twice and being
Oh
extra
yeah.
cautious when
Hmm.
backing up. So, yeah. Um, so maybe to switch gears a little bit, just as we're kind of winding this
Hmm.
down here, do, how would you say that driving plays a role maybe in your life now? And maybe as we're kind of coming to an end, has it given you some life lessons? Have you had some insights for your own personal growth through your experiences on the road? Um, is it is it kind of a metaphor in a way for your personal journey or challenges in life? I don't know if there's any kind of larger reflection as we're drawing to a close that you might like to make about driving.
Yeah, I remember speaking with someone who works as a counselor and also like a psychiatrist, I guess, or psychologist, and he said that the way we view our cars is kind of it's really kind of a metaphor for ourselves. So the way we treat our cars is really kind of, I don't know if it how strongly the connection is, but it's not wrong to think that that's the way that we treat ourselves as well. And um, that always stuck with me for a while, and it made me think of how it's also, just be more mindful of, kind of a way to take a step back and look at yourself by looking at your car. How does the inside of your car look? How does the outside of your car look? And kind of think, well, is this reflecting about who I am, or do I need to make some changes? Is this really showing, the type of person that I am? But with all this experience, um, almost 30 years of driving, um, in my life, then yeah, it's made me think. I think, like I said before, the biggest lesson maybe, and said even earlier, one of the biggest lessons is, right, don't rush, you know, um, but always make sure that you are being careful. So many things happen while you're driving that are unexpected, that you just have to always think about being careful, um and then also being the idea of using driving as a way to be spontaneous. But I think more than anything, maybe of my times driving, I probably think the most about the close calls, the things that didn't happen, and maybe being a little bit of a perfectionist at times. Sometimes I think about those, and it my kind of initial feeling when I think about those times is like I feel a little bit of unease, like kind of like, oh wow, oh it could have been so terrible. Oh wow. I'm just not really think I'm just so lucky, but just think, oh, it could have been so terrible. It could have been so much worse. It could have been so terrible. But I think instead now I've shifted my thinking to think, what a, an amazing display of God's grace that was. That there wasn't an accident, or that God saved me from what could have been terrible. That um, for all things considered, this should have been an accident, or should have been someone I might have, I didn't see that person on their bicycle. I might have really hit them, when I was pulling out of a store, and they're sailing down the hill, and I didn't see him. And I think, wow, by God's grace, that both of us were kept safe in that situation, especially the person on the bicycle. And we're driving these big cars, and they're big and heavy and strong and powerful, and can cause a lot of harm if you're not careful with them. And yeah, seeing them as a way of something, responsibility, not necessarily a privilege, but something, a real duty for ourselves. And then the times where we've had close calls and we've made it through it is a real good illustration of God watching out for us, and being mindful of us, every moment wherever we are. And I think those are some lessons that I've finally learned, and have kept with me thanks to driving.
Those are wonderful lessons, and thank you for sharing that perspective. I really like that. Um, what comes out to me for this topic is about relationships, and in particular how driving helps us connect with other people while we're in the vehicle, but
Mhm.
also when we arrive at our destination. And it's a good metaphor for life. And if you are part of a family, thinking about the journey that you're on, going somewhere together as a family, or if you're an individual and you live alone, when you go to visit friends, it's kind of like that sense of in life of being on a journey and seeing people along the way and celebrating that and enjoying that. And this picture here that I'm displaying for those who are watching on
Mm.
YouTube is of me and my two of our three children, Micah and Aubrey, when they were little. One time we were at home and they were particularly bored. And so I said, why don't we go out of my car and just relax? And they said, okay. And so Micah got in the front seat and pretended to be driving. And I took a book and was reading. And Aubrey took a book and sat in her car seat there in the back. And we just spent quite a bit of time relaxing. And Katie thought that the whole thing was quite cute. So she came out with the camera and snapped this picture of us while we were there. But it kind of fits in with that metaphor of driving as an expression of journey together with others.
Mm.
And um, part of that is the joy of being together. And so that's a tremendous positive aspect of driving that I really cherish. And we've talked about the challenges of driving too.
Mm.
And I think it's always good to be aware that on any journey, you need to be intentional about safety, and you need to pay attention to those around you and be focused on what you're doing. And but to also at the same time, while observing those things, to take time to be open to the moments of joy and enjoyment with those who are with you. So those would be my parting thoughts. And Barney, if you'd like to close us, or if there's anything else you'd like to say, please, I turn it over to you now.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important that as you mentioned that when you're driving, when you're concentrating, focused, you do have the time also to enjoy what's around you and experience it as you might not otherwise. So that's one of the really great things about driving. And we are thankful that you guys took a moment to sit down with us and watch along with us or listen along with us and hear our thoughts on driving, our experiences, and some of the photos that we were able to share and describe. And we hope that if there was anything new that we said, that you'll take it to heart, or if there's anything that you agree with, that you'll, reinforce that in the way that you go out when you're driving. And we, as we hope you are looking forward to the next episode, and we'll see you then. So for me, Barney, and Jacob, my co-host, this is the Two World Podcast, and don't drive like my brother.